Hey everyone, just a quick warning. This episode does have explicit language and may not be appropriate for kids. It had been 11 years since Anthony Curcio robbed a Brinks truck and made off with $400,000 in cash. It had taken us months of searching, reporting, digging through legal files and public records, but we finally found someone involved with Anthony back when he committed the crime. As far as we know, this is the first time any of the people who had helped him with the crime had agreed to talk with the media. It had taken a long time to find this person, and longer still to convince him to talk. But finally, we had him, and he was willing to go on the record. My name is Nate Scott. I'm a reporter and editor at For the Win and USA Today Sports. This is The Sneak. Our source's stipulations were that we augmented his voice, and we didn't mention his name or place of work. We're also not going to mention his role in all of this, but we will say he was not one of the people involved on the day of, and as you'll hear, he was one of the people in Las Vegas. As to why he decided to talk, well, we'll get into that. The planning of it, you knew about it, or knew something pretty early on. Did people actually think he was going to go through with it?
I don't think they did. I know I didn't. So he was always a hypothetical person. So he was always the guy that you thought would have fun planning something like that, but they would never never actually thought he would do something like that.
I want to apologize for the audio quality. When our source called me, it was a bit unexpected, and I had to quickly rig together a way to record our phone call when I rang him back. Do you remember when you first heard that it happened? And, did you know instantly?
When it first happened, did I know instantly? Yeah.
A few weeks later, Anthony asked him to go to Vegas, all expenses paid. He took the trip. You're in Vegas. Anthony said it was never explicitly said where the money came from, but that everyone just sort of knew. That was how he put it. Everyone knew. Is that accurate? Did everyone sort of know where the money was from, even if no one was really talking about it?
It was very you just didn't want to know. You didn't want to get in trouble.
And it was kind of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I mean, when Anthony was out of the room, were you guys talking about it? Or was it one of those things that everyone just sort of kept quiet? Like it was just not discussed the whole weekend?
It just wasn't discussed. It was kind of just to look at each other like, oh shit, he pulled this off.
You're probably wondering how we convinced our source to talk. We didn't really. Anthony did. After we emailed back and forth, our source reached out to Anthony, and Anthony told him he could trust us. It was one of the first times the two had communicated in 11 years. Even then, though, I was still sort of confused why he would agree to go on the record.
It's been an emotional, last, I don't know how many years, for a long time. Not having that.
11 years.
11 years. So 11 years. And I just want my friend back and know that I can never have that back.
Our source agreed to talk because he missed his friend. Such was the pull Anthony had over him. He talked because he knew Anthony would listen to this podcast. He wanted to get him a message.
What I portray right today with you can get to him, and that's going to be huge for me because that's all I've ever wanted to say to him was how much I still love him and hope for the best for him and his family.
I called Anthony to ask him about this, to see what those words meant, to see if he wanted reconciliation as well. He was hesitant.
I don't know. I mean, it's not like I'm saying I would never meet him, or if I saw him now, I wouldn't talk to him. I mean, I probably would. But what the scary part is that I would become immediate friends with him again. And then it's like, how much time would I invest in that?
Anthony says he harbors no ill will towards the people who were involved in whatever capacity back then. But something that pretty clearly eats at him is the fact that just about everyone, minus him, cooperated with the police. He had specifically made it part of his deal that he would never name anyone. But everyone else? They talked. Our source talked. JJ talked. The driver and lookout cooperated. Anthony says he doesn't care about that he understands why they did it. But still, his best friends had all given him up when things got tough. That's not something you forget.
I get it. I understand. I just, at the time, it was like, I don't know how I didn't see it coming. But yeah, it was just like, wow, the next day, like, he really said all this stuff. Like, I just didn't, if a cop comes and asks me a bunch of questions, like, and about my friend or something, like, maybe you say this or something. I just didn't understand it at the time. I didn't get it. I'm just wired a different way.
Do you have a fear that if you started hanging out with the people that old Anthony used to hang out with, that old Anthony might come back?
There's nothing I could get that me to come back except me.
Our source confirmed a lot of Anthony's story, but he also told me some things I didn't know.
When we were in college, it was like writing big prescription slips and learning how to write in the doctor notes, write itself prescriptions, and then...
It's a bit hard to hear, but he said that Anthony had taught himself how to forge doctor prescriptions.
I knew about, like, scamming people on eBay, selling other people's stuff online, stealing stuff, stealing barbecues, any way that he could make a quick buck.
See, this is another part of Anthony's story that gets skimmed over. He wasn't a law-abiding citizen who turned desperate and committed one bold crime. At the time of the robbery, Anthony was a career criminal. He'd gotten away with a lot of it, but he admits to it now. There were the drugs, of course, but Anthony also told us he and some friends had gotten a hold of a high-end printer, which they used to make fake IDs. They even printed fake, high-value baseball cards and sold them on eBay, according to Curcio. There were Craigslist scams, furniture robberies, loan sharking schemes, real estate fraud, on and on. Again, I only found out about any of this stuff after I started reporting. And Curcio wouldn't lie exactly, but he'd leave a lot of stuff out, or mess up the timeline. Anthony told us about the fake prescriptions, for example, but he told us he'd done it in the weeks leading up to the crime. Our source was telling us he'd been doing it since college. This was another example of the story changing, mutating. I wanted to find out, how did this keep happening? How did this story get so messed up? Was it Anthony or was it something else? So I asked, just about everyone. Let's start with David Kushner, who wrote the first big profile of Curcio in GQ.
Because this happened, it was what, 2008?
8.
I think Anthony was really one of the early people to go viral, to achieve kind of become internet famous. If this had happened today, he would have really been a meme. Anthony was like pre-meme,
Mm-hmm.
He was primordial meme. It was because that story did get around. It was just one of those kooky kind of things that you would read about on the internet.
I wanted to ask you about one part of the story that you sort of allude to in the GQ article, and I was curious why you did so.
Yeah.
Anthony didn't do this alone.
Mm-hmm.
He had several people helping him at different stages. Was there a debate about naming them, even though they were never in?
No, what I later found out, and actually it was from Anthony, that there were, the time that story was done, it's still, the full story hadn't come out yet, and he told me that he withheld a lot. He withheld some things in that story. So I wasn't aware of the extent to which he had help at the time. And actually, to a degree, I'm not even, and actually even now, I don't quite know. I know that there were other people involved, but I don't know the extent of it. So did any of those people get in trouble, or what happened?
They're all fine. They're all.
So none of them were charged with anything?
Anthony confirmed this with us, by the way. He withheld quite a bit from Kushner, and I think that in part explains what happened with the story. The first writer to do the big feature didn't get all the information, and then the game of media telephone started. Kushner didn't fully understand the role of the accomplices, and everyone read his piece, so they just used his information. Anthony was in prison, so he wasn't exactly around to set the record straight. But I don't think that's the only reason the story changed.
I think it's a better story as a one-person story.
This is Curcio's attorney, Jeffrey Cradle.
I think it's not that interesting of a story to say that there were. I mean, there's components to people who helped with this that would be a very interesting story. Guys be sitting in a creek in the middle of the night digging is interesting. People would do that, but the sort of the people going along on scouting, people providing storage, people providing all of that, it didn't fit the easy narrative.
Mitch Ruth, the eyewitness, agrees. Why do you think the story changed?
Maybe they wanted it to be more romantic. It has all the glitzy, glamoury, sensational issues, Craigslist, and no weapon, and nobody got hurt, and escapes in an inner tube, and there's all these things that are titillating and salacious and on. And a homeless person, gee, what else could you have? A nun in an orphanage? I mean, gee, there's all these things to the story. And I think that's what people wanted to focus on.
It makes sense. The story was simpler to tell with one person. But I had one question left. What role did Anthony play in it? Was there a little part of you that liked getting all the credit? What was your idea?
Well, yeah, it was all really, me involving those other people, there was just no, I would have been better off just doing it all on my own.
Seems simple, right? Open and shut case. Government only charges one guy, media keeps the story simple, Anthony takes full credit. Because why not? He's the only one getting punished, might as well take the fame and notoriety that comes from it. There was only one problem with all of that. The book Anthony wrote. Anthony wrote a book about his crime, a full-on nonfiction retelling. It's called Heist and High. It's all but out of print. We found a digital copy on a Dutch website somehow and read it that way. He wrote it with a co-author and, well, it has everything about his crime. It has the driver and the lookout and JJ. Curcio doesn't name them, but they're in there. It's got it all. He published it way back in 2013. So this idea that Anthony manipulated the story for his own gain just doesn't really work. He told the real story. He published a book with the real story. But then I started thinking about something that happened out in Monroe. On the first day driving around, I asked Anthony to recount his crime, and he did, start to finish, with everyone involved. The next day, I asked him again to tell his story, but this time we were in a hotel room and had a camera trained on him.
My name's Anthony Curcio. I planned an armored car robbery in Monroe, Washington.
Anthony would go on for a few minutes, and he never once mentioned the accomplices. At all. They had been there a day earlier, but now, with the camera on him, they were gone from the story. I asked Anthony why this happened, and he couldn't really explain it. He didn't even realize that he had done it, and when I pushed him on why, he didn't have an answer. The best he could offer was that it was maybe a subconscious thing, and that he was just trying to tell the best version of the story in the time I had given him. I mean, what do you think of the plan? It's kind of a ridiculous plan. I mean, it's sort of genius, but it's also ridiculous.
For sure. Growing up with Anthony, he loved movies. I mean, gangster movies, monster movies, gambling, violence. So it made him fun. It's like the stories he would tell and the stuff that would happen when you were with him was just always memorable. And so, like I said, people just gravitated towards him, and you just wanted to be in his circle. And if you weren't in his circle, you just felt left out. You felt like you were going to miss not being a part of his next story.
Do you think that the crime had its plan because it made the best possible story?
I mean, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it, the most fascinating, intriguing way. And I felt like he must have known, obviously, that there was a risk involved. And if he was going to get caught, he wanted to get caught doing it the most crazy way possible.
This was something, I'll admit, I never considered until our source floated the idea that this was the plan all along. That the craziness of his plot was an insurance policy. Anthony making sure that if he were to get caught, he'd have an amazing story to profit off of. It was like David Kushner said, Anthony was one of the first people to go viral. Did he see this all coming? Did Anthony understand that the internet fame that came from his ridiculous plan would be the key to his salvation, even if he did get caught? It's an incredible theory. It's too incredible. It couldn't be what actually happened. Right?
I wasn't trying to get caught. I just was really, really desperate. But then again, why did I think of those things? I don't know. I don't really know. I think that this was, unless I am some total split personality where really it was like I subconsciously wanted to get caught. I mean, maybe it was some crazy ass plan, but if it was, I'm not that. I think you're giving me more credit. I'm more like a broken record. I'm forgetting shit now and forgetting I told you stuff. But I don't think to mastermind all of this to happen to get caught so this story would be like this. I'm not that's really good, but I could never do that.
Next episode, we will wrap up our first season of The Sneak. We'll look at where Anthony is now, how he's living, and the bizarre way he made a small fortune after prison. We'll also ask him about his urges, and if he'll ever truly be able to stay away from a life of crime. The Sneak is a project of For the Win and USA Today Sports. It is produced by myself, along with Anthony Pacillo and Pat Shanahan. Audio engineering and sound design from Chris Bowerbank, and our sound recordist is Josh Savare. Research and additional production from Daniela Schneider. Our executives are Kate Gutman and Mark Hyland. Thanks to Emmanuel Lozano, Joe Myers, and the Monroe Police Department.
Hey sports fans, if you want to see more videos like this, check out some of our other ones right here. And if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button and stick around for more from USA Today Sports.